Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about poultry housing. Okay, so why do we need a poultry house? There are several reasons. Okay. A poultry house is protection from adverse conditions. Okay. For example, if there is heavy rain, okay, imagine what would that do to your birds. Okay, after heavy rain, your birds would be wet. Also, imagine the heat of the sun. For example, the birds have been exposed to the heat of the sun. They would pant, which leads to respiratory problems later on. A poultry house also maintains an economic operation. Okay? As compared to, for example, if you have your birds in your backyard, okay, it's hard to count how many birds you already have. Also, it would be hard to feed if, for example, you need to provide them feed if they're all scattered. Which brings us to controlled feeding, which is ensured. Okay. For example, if you need to administer a specific diet to your birds, then having a house would be economical. Okay, because all the birds are contained in one location, as opposed to, for example, if they are again scattered in your yard. Okay. Poultry housing provides the ideal climatic condition. Okay. With a house, you're able to determine if your birds are already panting from heat or if they are too cold, in which case you can provide auxiliary heating. Next is disease control. A poultry house, if properly locked, prevents access to unauthorized personnel. Okay. And unauthorized personnel, they would be vectors for disease. Okay. They would bring disease to your operations via their footwear. Okay. This would also prevent animals or birds from entering your operations. And, you know, these feral birds, they also bring disease like Newcastle disease. And then poultry house, okay, it is needed to supervise operations. Okay. If you need to make a quick eyeball of the growth of your birds, then if they're all contained inside the house, you would have at least an idea. If you entered the house and then you reach the end of the house, you'll have a visual survey of all your birds. As opposed to, for example, you're going to do a visual check if all your birds are in the range. Okay, so the next question is where can we put up a poultry house? A poultry house should be away from residential and industrial areas. Okay, so why should we do that? Okay, it's the people problem. Okay. With residential areas, they would complain about, yes, they would complain about the odor as well as the flies. Okay. And thus, it is important that poultry house or your operation should be away from residential areas. How about industrial areas? Okay, for industrial areas, the issue is again with people. Okay, the people who work in industrial areas. Okay, right. A poultry house should have access to roads. Okay, why? Because, for example, you need to bring in the chicks to your poultry house. Then, imagine if they would need to travel a rough road, okay, going up a mountain. Imagine the stress that the chicks would be under. Also, for example, come harvest time, and you need to carry the small chicks, which are now big birds. And imagine bringing them down from a mountainous location. Okay, also, you need roads. For example, if feeds need to be delivered. Okay, that is why access to roads is important. Next is provision of water and electricity. Okay, for layer operations, you need electricity because of the light. Okay, light needs electricity. Okay, as well as brooding early on in the chick's life. You need electricity, or sometimes you need liquefied petroleum gas. However, there are some farms which need electricity or rely only on light to provide electricity. You also need to provide your birds with water. Okay, if you just rely on rainwater, okay, and rain does not come, so your operation will be compromised. Okay. Next, we should place our poultry house near a place where there is availability of labor. Otherwise, if you place it in a very remote area, labor would not come cheap. Okay. You would also need to consider housing your people. Okay. Whereas if the farm is or the poultry operation is located uh, near a place where there is adequate availability of labor, then what they could do, what your laborers could do would be come inside during the day and then leave just before nighttime. Okay, so next, your poultry house should be in an elevated area without water logging. Okay, why is it important? Okay, for one, water helps in the release of ammonia. Okay, that is why we need to avoid water logging. Okay, and of course it could give rise to larvae of insects. Okay, and also diseases, also mosquitoes. Okay. Next, your poultry house should have adequate ventilation. Okay. For the reason that ammonia is a respiratory concern for your birds. Okay, that is why your poultry house should have adequate ventilation. Okay, next we move on to ideal layout. Okay, so your layout should provide some form of biosecurity. Okay, next the wind direction should be from the youngest to the oldest, if multi-age. The marketing office, feed, and egg storage should be at the front so as to limit movement of people in the operations. Okay? And then the disposal pit should be located at the far end. Okay. The way that a typical farm would be designed should be that there is a gate, and then the first layer would be composed of a marketing office. And that's also where your feed storage or feed milling operation should be. Okay, so that for example, there are raw materials being delivered to your feed mill. Okay, they would just reach that first layer of your operations. And if, for example, there are marketing people who would like to buy your birds or would like to buy your eggs, then they would just be in that first layer. Okay. Right, and then the next layer or the second layer should be where your operations are, where the poultry houses are, and then the third, the disposal pit. Okay, and it should be located at the far end. Okay? It doesn't make sense if the disposal pit should be in front, okay? Because you would have to carry the dead bird. Okay, okay, and then said here that the wind direction should be from the youngest, the youngest of the flock to the oldest of the flock. Although a multi-age operation is highly discouraged, if, for example, you cannot avoid it, at least the wind direction should be from the youngest chicks to the oldest. Okay, right, and then again, the main consideration for this is that you should limit the traffic people entering your operations. Okay, if your first layer would be the marketing office, then the people who buy your eggs or the people who buy your chickens, they don't have any business going to your hen house. Okay, right. The same with the people who deliver raw materials. Okay, these trucking companies, they have been everywhere. Okay, they go to all places. They pick up all sorts of disease in their wheels. That is why they should just be confined to the first layer of your operations. Okay, so what are the types of poultry houses? Okay, first, we have the brooder house. Okay, what it is, it can be used to brood and rear egg-type chicks from 0 to 8 weeks of age. Next is the grower house. Okay, this is used to grow egg-type birds from 9 to 18 weeks of age. Okay, so after the brooder house, the birds would be transferred to the grower house when they are from 9 to 18 weeks of age. Okay, so next is the brooders or grower house. The birds are reared from 0 to 18 weeks of age. That's the entire brooding and growing period of egg-type chicken. Then afterwards, we'll be transferring the birds to the layer house. Okay, it can be used to rear birds over 18 weeks of age until they are 72 weeks of age. Okay, right. Next, we have the broiler house. This is used to rear broilers up to 6 weeks of age. And then the breeder house, in which both male and female breeders are maintained at an appropriate sex ratio of 1 cock to 10 hens. Okay. Next, we have the environmentally controlled house. Okay, the entire environment is controlled to optimize the growth of the bird. Okay, so what are the environmental conditions for rearing broilers? The temperature should be ideally 22 to 30 degrees Celsius. Okay, in Fahrenheit, that's 70 to 85 degrees. Relative humidity should be at 30 to 60%. Ammonia level should be less than 25 parts per million. Okay, above that, there would be adverse conditions happening to your chickens. Okay, next, litter moisture should be about 15 to 25%. And then airflow should be 10 to 30 meters per minute. Okay, about house orientation. If you're located in the area near the equator, it should be in an east-west direction. Okay, what is the reason for this? The reason is so we could limit the exposure of our house to the sun. Okay, if the sun rose in the east, then only half of your house would be heated in the morning. And then come midday, it would be the whole house. Okay. And then as afternoon approaches, it would just be the other side of the house, which has not been heated early in the morning. And then also north-south direction. Okay. They should be applicable for hen houses that are located in the northern hemisphere. Okay? Because in this part of the world, the northern hemisphere, they are trying to get more of the sun, okay, to help provide or produce natural heat for their birds. Next, we move on to space requirements. For layers that are day old to 4 weeks, that would be 15 square inch per bird. 4 to 8 week layers should be 30 square inches per bird. And then 9 weeks to laying, that's 50 to 60 square inches per bird. Now for broilers, day old to 3 weeks, it's just zero point 0.3 square feet per bird. Okay, and then 3 to 4 weeks, that's just going to be zero point 0.5 square feet per bird. And then 5 weeks to market, it's going to be 1 square feet per bird. Okay, now the minimum watering space requirements, day old to 4 weeks, is just going to be 0.5 centimeters, or that would be the equivalent of 2 pieces of 1 gallon drinking fountain per 100 birds. Okay, next 4 to 8 weeks, that would be just 0.6 to 1 centimeter per bird, or just 2 pieces of a 2 gallon drinking fountain per 100 birds. Okay, now for 9 weeks to near laying, it's going to be 1 to 2 centimeters per bird, or 4 pieces of 2 gallons drinking fountain per 100 birds. For layers, it's going to be 2 to 2.5 centimeters per bird, or about 4 pieces of a 2 gallon drinking fountain per 100 birds. Okay, so here are the problems of overstocking or overcrowding. Okay, there would be unequal feeding, which leads to deprivation of the smaller or weak chickens. Okay, this cannot be avoided. For example, if you have a very large house, okay, some of the birds are located near the heat source or the light source. Okay, and some of them are farther away. Okay, so there would be unequal feeding. And the problem with overstocked hen houses, this problem cannot be corrected. Okay? That is why you should keep the population of your birds to the ideal. Okay, so now if there's an equal feeding, there would be poor growth performance. Okay, so it would show in your records that your birds are not getting too much weight. What you can do for that is to segregate. Okay? Not really cull immediately, but to segregate the birds. Okay? Try to get the small ones, and then you keep them at the part of the hen house which is nearest to the door. Okay, what's the reason for that? Then, for example, you need to make a visual survey in the morning. You can see if the small birds have improved, or if there's still a problem with them. Okay. The reason for that is so that you could monitor their poor health, which is the third problem. Okay. If our birds do not eat, then it would follow that they would have poor health. Okay, they would have poor immunity against diseases. Okay, and if they have poor immunity against diseases, this brings about a compromised feed conversion, which is number 4. Okay, if your birds are eating but they're not gaining weight because of a disease condition, or if there's unequal feeding, okay, then that would be a problem for your operation. And if birds are in poor health, they would have poor reaction to heat stress. Okay, so if also there are a lot of birds in your house, okay, each bird produces body heat. Okay, and then it would be stressful for your birds. And for example, the disease could not be controlled, and there's too much heat stress, there would be mortality for your birds. Okay. And then, of course, the heat stress, it produces bullying and cannibalism. Okay. And then an overstock or an overcrowded house would also provide poor disease control, because if there are a lot of birds, and for example the operation has been struck with a respiratory disease, then it would be harder to control. Okay. And then of course, if there are more birds, then there would be a wet litter, an unnecessary wet litter, because birds are prone to wastewater. Okay. And then, of course, with their manure, there would be an excess of ammonia. All right, that's it for poultry housing.